It was about 4 years ago when I came to the Parks and Rec Committee here in Nibley City, just sort of a meet the candidate thing, and they said, will you build us an indoor rec center? And I said, what's an indoor rec center? Because it's not something that I certainly didn't have on my radar at the time. But since then, we have heard from many residents in Nibley that they're tired of driving through Logan, and it seems to be getting harder and harder to drive through Logan to get to soccer practice at 4 a.m. in the morning, or even worse during the day. So as a response to the desire for indoor rec space, Nibley City Council took on the task of doing a feasibility study to find out at what scale we might do an indoor rec center, what amenities might be included, most importantly, how we would go about paying for it. And in the process, then we soon realized, of course, we knew before we started that if it's Nibley City by themselves, then there'd be a certain scale and a certain number of amenities that we could offer. And if it was Nibley City in cooperation with other jurisdictions, especially jurisdictions south of the county, then I think you have a slide. Yeah, how about? I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking, Eric, I promise. So, what kind of coalition might we put together in order to do something more? Yeah, let's keep going. I want to get to. And so we have, with the blessing of legislative bodies in the cities above, we have surveyed their residents. It's a self-selected survey, and found enough interest in, and actually I've had enough questions about if we do this thing, what's the process? You know, what's the legal process of how we go about that? And so that's really the goal tonight. It's not to decide, are we going to do a special service district? It's not to commit anyone. It's not to sell anyone on we really need to do this thing or don't need to do this thing. It's a what if kind of scenario. We decided in the south part of the valley to do a special service district for indoor rec. What are the legal, legislative, and direct democratic processes that would establish such a thing? Because it's all about the details, right? So we have Eric Johnson with us. Thank you very much. You can come on up, Eric. And Eric is an attorney with Yellow Horse and Johnson. Oh, see, I'm already didn't give you top billing, but and they work for Nibley City. We're very happy to have their services, and so Eric will talk about some of those details about how this thing could come to be. The cities on the bottom half, by the way, full disclosure, you all know this. The cities on the bottom half are also being surveyed, in addition to the cities on the top, by the Cache County Council's decision to also do a feasibility study from a county-wide perspective. So the Nibley City Council has decided and that we would freely share any data that we had, any information that we had from our own surveys at the county level. And again, that's just a bigger scale that have a lot of questions of to be determined. Okay. The reason I'm standing up here is because we will have a quorum of the Nibley City Council within minutes. So I won't call the meeting to order of the Nibley City Council until Aaron Manor, a third council member, gets here. But we also have a quorum, I believe, of the Nibley City Parks and Rec Committee. So will you please, Kendall, call your meeting to order? Tell us who's here just for the minutes, because so this is an open and public meetings kind of thing. This is Kendall Welker.
Kendall Welker, his neighbor, sorry.
It's a small town.
I call to order, do I say everyone or just who's here?
Just your Parks and Rec Committee.
But
Who's here?
everyone but.
Just the people that are here.
Okay, so John, Hayden, right there, Caitlin, Mastermind, Brett, mine goes blank, myself, we have Michael Stokes. I know your guys' name. And Manny Labus. So there's 5 of our 9. Is that good?
Okay, your meeting's in order, and, Kendall's right, there's nothing worse than standing up in front of a group of people and trying to remember the names of your own kids. So with that, Eric, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I will interrupt you, if you will allow me, when, our quorum is established for the city council. Are there any other towns that need to call a public meeting for? Okay, and so please, yeah, okay, then we're in the same boat. Scott, if you'll just, ask for the mic, and we'll give you a chance to do that. Eric, are there any other things that we can do to get you started? You'll tell us about yourself and.
Yeah,
Are the instructions clear?
yes.
Do you agree? Will you stick to that? No, I'm kidding. Eric Johnson, thank you.
Thanks. Just a little bit about me. So until the church retired, I was partners with the church that opposed to this. I don't know. Anyway, with COVID, and he thought he turned 70 and should be able to retire. So I didn't get a say in it. That's all I can say. So my undergrad degree was from BYU in physical plant administration. I used to do useful things. I used to work in hospitals, keeping all the facilities together. I followed in the footsteps of my father. And I picked up an MBA while I was doing that, and then I decided to go to law school. And I still remember when I told my dad I was going to go to law school. I was disappointed I was leaving, his field. And he said, I guess it's okay. He said, I heard that there's really only 2 attorney jokes after all. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, the rest are all true. So that was kind of my introduction into law. When I got to law school at BYU, one of the other students, he told me, he said, his name was Greg, he says, kind of in the evening, just the 2 of us, and he said, I was the next to last person admitted into our class in law school. I said, yeah. And I had been admitted very late in the process myself. So I said, yeah. He said, yeah. I said, how do you know that? I said, they told me I was next to last. He said, oh, when were you admitted? And he told me, and I was admitted after him, so I knew I was actually the very last person. Well, I didn't tell him anything. I didn't say anything to him about it. Right? And I still remember when I remember thinking, knowing that I was the last person admitted, I thought, it'd just be so nice to get, not just Fs and things like that. It'd be really nice not to flunk out. And remember when I went and I opened my grade report and I opened it up and it was straight A's. And I went to interview with the law firm and the guy said, how's it feel to be number 1 in the class? And I said, no, I said, she didn't tell me that. And so because I did well in law school, I got to clerk at the Utah Supreme Court for Justice Isaac Daniel Stewart. Afterward, I became a municipal bond attorney, which I've been municipal bond counsel to about 200 communities in Utah, and for general counsel to about 27 communities in the state of Utah. So that's just a little bit about myself. Let me tell you about some of the projects that, like this, are projects that try to bring multiple communities together in order to do something bigger and larger than otherwise could be done. I'm working with Price City, Carbon County, Carbon Water Conservancy District, Price River Water Improvement District, Price Wellington Irrigation Company, and others on a reservoir right now. It's projected to be about $250 million. They want to build a new reservoir there to help their water sources. And it has a similar dynamic in that you're bringing people with not all identical desires together to work on something that is bigger than any one of them alone. And also, just about 10 days ago, got a Supreme Court decision.
Mary, can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
I have a legal obligation. My name is Larry Jacobson, Mayor of Nibley City. I call it Nibley City Council meeting to order. We have received a quorum with Garrett Mansell, Nathan Larson, Aaron Mann. And Norm. We got a super majority now, so, okay. Give us a quick, sorry. All right.
No, that's good. Okay, another project that, if you go back real quick, about 10 days ago, not Thursday of last week, but Thursday the week before, got a Supreme Court decision that approved the environmental studies for railroad to go from, if you know where Social Summit is, between Price and Spanish Fork, they will connect with the railroad there and jump over into the Luna Basin, about 88 miles of railroad. That had been shown by the environmentalists. It was 7 counties got together on this project because of process guidelines, and it'll be about a $2.5 billion project. This one has a real public-private dynamic to it. Private pump with public dollars, and then they'll get, like I said, there'll be $2 billion worth of private investment on that project. So that's, I mentioned those two because those are, you know, bringing multiple public bodies together to do something that otherwise couldn't be done. Some cities we represented here in Cache County, Nibley, Hiram, Millville, Roseville, Mendon, Providence, Hyde Park, Lewiston, Trenton, Cornish, mostly as municipal body council and some as general council. So that's just kind of who we are. So now let's get into districts. My basic understanding is that the thought is, hey, if multiple communities can come together, create one district to over recreation, then you could do more than any one single community. And there's obvious reasons why. One thing that is going to be important as this moves forward is that it's important to have full council support in doing something like this. And I'll tell you why. Because if you create a district like this with the idea of, hey, that district will be its own revenue generator, it will impose its own tax, and so it's not continually drawing off of the underlying communities. Okay. 25 years of doing elections, if you don't have full support, those elections fail. You can pretty much fail. And so, if there's ambivalence, then the public picks up on that. And it's always difficult to get any tax measure through. The average Joe is like me. And if I see something that says, hey, you want to increase your taxes? The answer is no. Okay. And so it has to be a project that has a lot of attraction and also a lot of support of there's really two types of districts that I want to talk about. And I don't know why the legislature did this. At one point, they called them local districts and special service districts. Now they call them special service districts and special districts, just so you couldn't confuse them. Okay. But there's two different processes. There's a lot of similarities between them. but there are some important differences between them as well. But for both, every city that would be within would have to adopt a resolution saying, we want to create this district, or we will be part of it, okay? Also, it doesn't matter which of the two district formats you use, there has to be a public hearing to inform the public and vote support for the recreation district. Also, for that district to have a tax base, there must be an election. There's just no way to do it without the public saying, yes, we agree to the imposition of a tax on us. We want this, okay? And it doesn't matter which of the two districts you use, you have to have that. And I would imagine that that district, however it ends up, whichever type of district it is, I would imagine each participating community would want to have representation of the district. So those are the type of things that a city would need to look at in order to move forward with the district. Steps to create a recreation district. Yes.
That's a question on the last slide.
Please.
So we're recording this, and that's the need, the formality of microphones.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. If you have a question, Eric, if you're okay with
Yeah.
speaking to the mic.
That's great.
If I can ask a question, if this is created, so Ryan Snow with Providence City, if this is created by a resolution or an ordinance, what happens if you go through this process and the election is a decline? So now you have an entity possibly created with no taxability. Does that notify the entity, the district, or is the district created, or is the district not created until the election occurs?
For special districts, there would be an election to create the district.
Okay.
And then to get a tax, after it's created, you then have to have a second election to have the people approve the tax, okay? For a special service district, you can create the district without an election. But then to impose a tax, you must hold an election, okay? And so that's one of the key differences between the two, is when you have to have an election to create it, and then you don't. And the question was, if the people decline a revenue source for the district, you can just.
But the district is, sorry, follow-up question to that. The district is created with the council and those steps create the district, and then the district votes to be able to tax or not. So the district's created,
Yes,
by the council's district's created, not by the election.
that's right. That's right. Mhm.
Corey Queen, Novel City. The election, is it just a simple majority that makes it pass, makes it a taxing seat?
Yes,
And that's overall, let's say there's 5 cities. Overall, if it's, let's say Nibley, everybody hates it. I know that's not the case, but everybody hates it. Nobody votes for it, but all the other cities do. So a majority goes into place. It would go into effect because it's more than 50%.
yes. Yes. And that's why the district is created, so that it isn't
City by city.
city by city.
That was my question, was if your city overwhelmingly voted no, then, but if the majority voted for it, then you would still be, as a city, still in it?
In theory, yes. Mhm. Mhm. Now, if it is possible for areas within the district to withdraw, just because once you're in, just couldn't start, you could never get out. No, an area could withdraw.
So in other words, every city in the district needs full council support, but if you get one city that does not have full council support.
With the railroad project, They initially thought about including Grand County as part of that. And Grand County initially said we want it in, and then about 3-4 months later, they said, no, we want out. So we just let them out because it's problematic if you have one of your underlying communities that is in building, that becomes problematic, just pretty much. And exactly where the line is, that's a case by case basis. Great. Okay, let's move forward. So you have to hold a public hearing, inform the public. You inform the public how to protest the creation of the district, okay? There's, for both types of districts, the public can protest and remove the power of the cities to create the district, or one of the cities to create the district if they should not protest. Yeah. So, not how much you want to do it, there's not a way to override the public sentiment. Okay. You need to indicate that one of the cities that hey, we're not planning on doing this without the absence of the district. We as the city ourselves don't plan on providing this service. That's what we want the district. Now, if the district all falls apart, that may change, but in the district creation process, that would be the steps. So for a special district, there must be an election simply to approve the creation of the district. It's a 2-election process. For a special service district, sounds like it's the same thing, but it isn't. But it is. I mean, they both have the same powers to do essentially the same things, but they have slightly different steps in creation. For a special service district, you can create that simply by city resolution, and it can be created now. The public has a chance to protest, they get to override the city council if they want to, but you don't have to have an election just to create the district, okay? Once the district is created, for it to get a funding source, it must call an election to impose taxes for operations and for capital construction expenses. Okay? And that's where the rubber hits the road, right? That's where you really know if people want it or not. Questions? Concerns?
Thank you, Eric. We've talked about individual municipalities. Is there also a chance, I don't know where this would go, but a chance to include unincorporated parts of Cache County?
Yes. Yes, unincorporated county is part of the district that they choose. And it's the same process. The county it's a council here, right?
Yes.
It's a council. Yeah, they would have to do the same thing that each city council. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not the entire county.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they can say just this area is going to be in, and you draw a circle around the area that it's in, and the part that isn't in is out. Okay. Let's go to the next slide then. How is a recreation district to be funded? Initially, obviously in the creation process, the district isn't in existence and it doesn't have any funding source. So the cities have to, there's a priming of the pump that has to occur, or each city has to, put in a little bit. If it is a special district, there's 2 separate elections would be required to create the recreation district and to authorize taxes. If it's a special service district, only 1 election is required to authorize taxes. I assume the recreation district would also charge a service fee for, its recreation services. Like if there's a swimming pool, we charge a cost to get in the pool. And also public-private partnerships can be explored, with the private funding supplement public funds. And, let me give you an example of what comes to my mind when I say that. So I live down in Utah County. My son was, we got him in gymnastics because he was incredibly active. And we tried him in T-ball and he was just bored to tears. He couldn't stand it.
I'm talking to a rec umpire here.
There you go, there you go. He literally, in T-ball, he literally fielded every ball for the whole team. You know, so anyway, one of our neighbors, they had an older son, he was 12 or 13, my son was about, I can't remember, 6 or 7. And anyway, this 12 or 13-year-old boy was in gymnastics. And so my wife said, you know what? We should get our son in gymnastics because, this will explain the whole story. First of all, he's adopted. So all of his athletic prowess has nothing to do with my gene pool. Okay. And he's also halfway ocean. And so he's never been on the growth chart, weight or height. He's always been very small. And but anyway, we got him in gymnastics. He was state champ one year in his age group, and then now he's gotten into bouldering, rock climbing type stuff, right? And he's real big into that. And the other day, he calls me up and says, "Hey, Dad, I think I have a big battery. Can you come give me a jump?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Where are you?" He says, "Yeah, I'm at the bouldering gym." And so I go down there and I give him a jump and I look around and there's this bouldering gym. There's a CrossFit gym. There's another gym that I asked him, I said, "Now what's that?" He said, "Well, that's kind of like America Ninja Warriors type of stuff there." And then there was a fourth gym, all using the same parking lot. The fourth gym was basketball courts. And my son was like, "Oh yeah, there's junior high and high school age kid basketball teams. They're just using that thing constantly." Okay. These are all 100% private. Okay. But they've made a little bit of a little campus there that they kind of all share the same parking lot, and the thing is just packed all the time. And so when I talk about a public-private partnership, a rec district could be the landlord for such a concept. Okay, they wouldn't necessarily run each of those different gyms, but they would be the landlord, provide the space, and then private businesses would come in and say, "Okay, I want this type of specialty gym here within this campus." And then you have the shared services and everything. Okay. So when I say a public-private partnership, that's kind of the type of thing that comes to mind. Questions, thoughts?
Corey, Noble City again. All right, so Eric, is the process the exact same if the county, if it wasn't a group of cities, but the whole county were to say, we're going to do a special service district, a recreation district? Is the same process done with all the cities having to buy off on it, or can they just put it on the ballot? I mean, they did the open space bond. I know that's a different thing, but that did not go to the cities for approval. It just was on the ballot.
If the cities, if this incorporated areas are going to be taxed, then the respective city councils have to buy in.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, the county only has voice over the unincorporated county areas. Yeah, please.
Just to make sure, Corey, that we're answering, that I'm understanding the question. So forget about us forming a special district or a special service district. What if Cache County as a whole, as an entire political jurisdiction, decided they would take on something like this as an entire county? Is that the question, Jeff?
If they're gonna use one of these two districts, then for each municipality, the city councils would have to agree to do it.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Right.
I presume the county could do that independently though, right? Not special service district, just a county-run facility, county program.
Yeah.
That is an alternative, correct?
If the county was not creating a district, but just saying, we're gonna do this in the county's name directly without creating a district, yes, it could.
And they could increase their tax.
And they could tax us
They could increase their taxes as they can at any time for increase.
without a vote.
They have truth in taxation, they can do that.
Okay.
In the longer Parks and Rec. So the county, if they said, we want this rec center, the truth in taxation means they can increase their taxes without a vote. Is that correct?
That's how any city or any county increases taxes without a vote, is they go through truth in taxation.
And so they could do that for a recreation.
They could increase taxes and they could apply it to a recreation center. Yes, they could.
Perfect.
Sorry.
They'd have to do it in the full county's name. They couldn't, to create a district, they would have to get your thumbs up, you're okay.
Would it require an election to borrow money on the faith and credit of Cache County? In other words,
Yes.
it's a bond.
Yes, yes. So when you say faith and credit, that's a general obligation bond, which means there is an election. And if they were to say, hey, this rec center is going to cost, what's a scary number?
65 million, do I hear 70, go on 75, do I, no.
That's a scary number, and,
10 million.
but, okay, so let me back up. If they're just paying for it out of their coffers, year by year, right? Then they don't have to have an election. But if it's gonna cost 65 million, they don't have that many coffers. And so they would call a bond election, and everybody in the county would have a voice.
Thanks for letting us just bop around. Those are great questions, great answers. Thank you.
Is that about the end? Do I have more? I can't remember. Yeah, it is the slides I had. Yeah.
Amy Garvey, Mendon. Just wondering, would it be the same amount per household across each city that would be involved? Or would it be a percentage per city?
If a district was created and a tax was imposed, the way the tax is imposed is on taxable value of real property. Okay, so it's not per household, it's the taxable value of each house.
So my house could be charged a different
No.
rate than the neighbor,
No, not a different rate, a different amount.
a different
The
amount.
rate is uniform, the amount depends on the taxable value of each home. Yeah, sorry. I misunderstood your question first, I apologize. So a uniform rate, the amount of the tax varies depending on the taxable value.
Could you maybe just go over the pros and cons of the two different ways you've talked about?
Sure. So a special district, the one that has to have an election to be created, that, in my mind's eye, is primary con of that we're going about it, because elections take time and, you know, you're giving yourselves two hurdles instead of one. With a special service district, you don't have to go through the election process to get it created. But the law does not anticipate multiple cities creating a special service district. And so there's certain powers that cannot be delegated to the district that you have to go back to the city councils in order to get approval for. And that would be calling an election for anything to do with taxes whatsoever. You gotta go back to the city councils for the okay? And the city councils may not want that. So one way to kind of blend the two is there's actually a provision in the Utah Code that says, hey, if you're a special service district and you want to, you can convert into a special district. Special district being the one that requires the election. Okay, so you could create a special service district without an election, and then after it's created, you could decide, hey, let's convert it into a special district, so we don't have to go back to the city councils to ask for another mayor anymore, and the district is more independent. And so there's a method to do that, and frankly, that would be, if you don't want the Mother May Eyes, that would be the course I would recommend. Start out creating a special service district that doesn't require an election. There are public hearings that are where the public, if the public doesn't want it, they can say, they can file protests, and if there's enough protests, then you can't move forward, okay? So they're still protected, but then you get it created, and then you can decide, okay, do we want to keep the Mother May I approach, or do we want to, and convert it into a special district now? So I didn't see that one. I blended those two things together, I'm sorry. So do we want to keep the Mother May I approach and not convert it? Or do we get rid of the Mother May I approach and convert it into a special district?
Eric.
Yeah.
John Hayden, Midley City Parks and Rec. On the conversion, I assume a vote is required by the public.
No. Right, yes, that's right. It's a little surprising, isn't it?
Wow, not the answer I was expecting. Okay, well, that's simpler. And I guess a tangential but separate question. When we talk about protests from the public, what is that mechanism? Is it filing a form, or hopefully it's not picketing outside of all?
Insurrection, baby.
It's a written protest. You don't have to have a Mexican flag to do it. It's okay if you don't. No, it's just, you submit something in writing saying, I object, I don't want it. And if there's enough of those, then it removes the discretion from the city council to move forward.
Could you speak to the governing body, how those individuals are put in place or elected for both options, the special district and the special service district?
You can choose. My recommendation would be with a multi-entity district is that you have the underlying communities each have a representative on the board. And that you would require the representative from each underlying community who is an elected official. And there's certain reasons under IRS tax codes that you want to do that. If your membership is made up of elected officials, you get better treatment in the case. And so that's what I would recommend, is that each community gets one, they appoint one elected official to be on that board.
And the alternate would be what?
You could have, an election. So instead of the underlying city appointing one of the council members, the mayor, to the board, you would, create the district, you would divide the district into what the Utah Code calls districts. Okay. And you would say, okay, so each district gets to vote on their representative to the board, and so your board members could be directly elected to the board instead of having elected officials appointed. There is a third option, it's not one I recommend, and that is you set it up where just anybody, let's say each city can appoint, but it doesn't have to be an elected official. They can choose who they want to appoint. And let's say it's the director from each city is on the board. But when the district board does not have elected officials on it, it's not given the same, in different situations, it's just not viewed the same. It's not given the same powers.
So what would the time frame look like between the two options of 2 elections or no elections, creating that service district? Because that's what our citizens, Nibley, is like, we want it now. So.
And whether Nibley or otherwise, I would make this comment that get it built before your children are in our house. Okay. These things take time. They take time, and so you have to be fairly dedicated to moving it along in order to get it done, or otherwise it languishes, and then it gets done, and it's someone else's kids get to use it. But this year, there is still time to get on the ballot for an election to create a special district in November. Okay? Everybody decided to hit the go button, then you can have an election on that in November. The deadline is, which I don't recommend getting up against, is 60 days before the election. Each of the underlying communities would have to say, go for it. Okay? You want that at least 30 days before that. Which would mean basically you've got June or July to decide. Okay? Then you would be created, the election would be canvassed. The canvass would be effective sometime, between Christmas and New Year, usually the 40-day canvass period expires. And so then you can go to the lieutenant governor and say, hey, we passed the election and you can become a district early next year. Okay? And then once the district is created, it could then call a bond election, which can be held in November. And so that would be as soon as you could have a funding election. It would be November of 2026. Okay. With the special service district, you'll have to go through that first hurdle of an election, but it's too late to create the district. You have to go through a public hearing process and different things like that. And that process is too long to get a bond election on the ballot for this November. We would have to start 60 to 90 days. Yeah, never stop to take that. If we wanted to do that, so again, you're not going to be able to get to the election, the funding, until November of 2026 for the special services.
So basically for either special service district or special districts, funding is not gonna be on the ballot until 26.
November 2026.
Okay, but I have a separate question, that's right. Each municipality would represent or will get someone to represent their city. And then those elected people would make the decisions about who's hired to run this facility, things like that.
So this is, as I envision it, and I'm hoping we're all kind of thinking the same. I envision this district not being handed the full parks and rec for all the cities. Okay, but a limited parking related to upper recreations.
Thanks, Eric. Nate Larson, New York City. So I'm just gonna walk through the process with all the questions and things that you helped us today. 3, 4, 5, all the cities represented tonight decide, yeah, let's try this. We would then write a resolution with some help legally. Right, we would then invite those cities to have a vote in their own councils to pass this resolution. I'm talking about the fastest track here, not the, let's say 3 or 4 pass those, that's fine, right? And then as we get further or closer to maybe bond, it's easier to just add groups to that through a similar process, or is there a different process there? It's like, you know, maybe Nibley's not ready yet, but everyone else moves forward. There should be in the process ways that you can add to the district, right?
The process to annex is the same as the process to create. You just go through the same process for that area. And there is a lot of truth to the story of the Little Red Hen. That people are not so interested in doing the work until they can smell the red bacon. Okay? There's a lot of truth to that. And so if there were a smaller group that decided to move forward, and then others wanted to jump in, there's a process to do that. And I have seen that dynamic where as the bread starts to bake, other people are like, hey, how do we be part of this? Yeah.
Justin Mon, Italy City. I'm still trying to wrap my head around just a little bit the funding and the abilities of each district. And so obviously to pull a big amount of money, you need to have an election or have a bond, but can either of the districts charge a property tax?
Not without an election.
Not without either one.
You can impose an election for 2 purposes. One is for operational expenses, the other is for capital expenses.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to.
Which typically is called a bond.
Okay, well, I'm trying to bring it back to examples we have in this valley of districts, and we have the water district there was an election to create the water district, Cache Water District. Now it's a district and it has the ability, they just raised taxes this last year, right? Through the truth and taxation process and are charging a property tax.
Yeah, but for one of these districts to start the taxing process, there must be an election. Both for operational as well as for.
Right. So we did have an election for the water district
Okay.
a few years ago, created the district. It just kind of existed. It was funded, I believe, by Cache County for a number of years. And then they just started charging an actual property tax through the truth and taxation process. So we had one election, created the district. They haven't gone for a bond needing a second election, but they are charging a property tax. Is that fitting one of these two that you're trying to?
That would not fit one of these. So for certain types of districts, okay, so historically, the way this happened was up until about the 1930s, there were no districts. Counties, cities, and towns. And then in the 1930s, with some of the economic struggles, the legislature, some of the first that they created were metropolitan water districts that are recreation. And these initial districts were challenged as being unconstitutional. Went to the Utah Supreme Court. Utah Supreme Court said, we're okay with it. Since that time, uh, there's 30-something different types of districts to be created. Obviously, and when it comes to water, sewer, and some other special purposes, then they're handled a little differently.
Okay.
Okay, they have different rules. But for a recreation district, okay,
Okay.
because a lot of those, they don't give them power for recreation. These are the two that are given power for recreation, so the two.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, there can be others, but the rules are.
Thank you, Eric. I'm not sure about the relevance of this point, but it gives me a chance to quote David Church, and very quotable. And I'm not advocating for special district that requires 2 elections or a special service district that could get off the ground with 1 election. However, David said, win graciously and lose quickly. And it's possible to me, in my mind, that 2 elections let us actually test the waters for, our citizens, our residents' appetite for this. So even if it takes longer, it may be, a chance to find out how residents actually feel about it. Now, BCBO, Whitney, thank you. You're gonna do a great job of collecting statistically valid data. I'm still waiting for. No offense to you, I'm waiting for the definition of that. I'm a data scientist.
We hire statisticians.
Okay, we hire statisticians, and we all know what that means. I'm one of those. But, the truth in the pudding will be what the elections produce.
That's right. Okay, exactly right. And if you want to go through 2, no objections, right?
Okay, thank you.
Not to contradict my good mayor, but Newton said the path of least resistance wins. If you go with,
Hey, who is Newton compared to David Church?
Physics and politics are different animals.
and I'm gonna get these backwards, the special district does not require an election, correct?
Special district requires the election to create the special service district.
Okay, I've overcome my shock with my last question. If we create a special service district, what is the timeline associated with then converting it to a special district?
Code does not mention the time. Does not say there's any minimum time that has to be a special service district before it can convert.
So
I checked, I looked, I was like, I had the same question. I'm like, gotta be there, gotta be, no, it's not.
So hypothetically, you could create a special service district. In your next meeting, convert to a special district. And then move forward without the mother may I's and put something on the ballot in 26 for taxation.
In theory, that's true, yep.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, you probably wouldn't, but legally it says it's possible.
My name is Bill Steth, and I'm with Providence City. A question come to my mind as we're discussing here. So we're representing several cities here. Some might feel it's necessary to test the water in their cities. Others might feel like they can move ahead right now without an election by adopting a resolution. District, what is the status of the whole district? Till everybody gets their work done, comes back together.
First question is always, who's getting in the vote? Always the first question. There's some that say, we only want to get in the vote if it's done this way, then the others have to agree to that. Or you can't create the district and have half do it one way. You understand?
governing documents of a district? Do we create bylaws? What does that look like?
Yeah, so, typically, and I'm, I call with Fairview City today on this. We just created a special service district in Sevier County as well. For Sevier County, just outside of us. So they don't have the same power to adopt ordinances that the city has. But they do adopt the rules and regulations. So we adopt the rules and regulations that, okay, here, we're gonna have a board, this is how many people are gonna be on the board, this is how people get on the board, right? We're gonna define that. Okay, now we have a board, we're gonna have rules about decorum, you know, we're gonna follow Robert's rules, so forth and so on. Then you're going to get to, okay, record keeping. We promise to keep records, and keep records in accordance with the government access. I can't say the grandma. So we're gonna follow grandma. We adopt rules saying that we're gonna follow the fiscal policies that apply to the special districts. It's essentially the same fiscal policies for both types of districts. Okay. So we basically say, hey, we're gonna, every year we're gonna have a budget. Whoever the director is of the district is settled with getting that budget ready. They got to move it forward to the board. The board has to hold a public hearing on the budget. I mean, you guys understand, and you adopt a suite of rules, probably 30 pages long, that covers all those.
In your experience, have you seen ones that are further along in that process of the ordinance making and then already kind of started to adopt those, or is it better to wait till things created to start? Because there's gonna be questions, right? When city councils get together to make ordinance, say we're in, because they're, well, who's governing it, how's it going? Is it better to kind of do them slowly trailing each other, or?
I'll say this, for political purposes, your citizens are gonna ask, how is this district gonna be controlled? And so you have to know up front how it's gonna happen. As a legal matter, the district can't create rules and regulations until the district has been certified by the utility director. Okay, but you gotta understand up front what's gonna be in those, to satisfy them.
It's the easiest way to be, yeah, privately funded.
I'll, you know, yeah, go ahead and say that in the mic so it gets on the record.
So the quickest and easiest way to get it quick would be have it privately funded.
Potentially. The issue is, can the public bodies prime the pump, so to speak, there's a word I want to use, to induce private businesses to coalesce and do this type of thing. What's that? Yeah, because you're gonna get there decades sooner if you induce it than if you just wait. You don't have the population base that we have does in order to let that just happen in the private sector. To do something like that, you need to induce it. But yes, I'm all for having private involved, except for certain things. For example, swimming pools will never make money. That's going to have to be on the public's dime, okay? But some other things, surprisingly, you can get enough support that it can actually be a private business. And you want to find that sweet spot where you're doing some of both.
Sorry, I just can't help but quote David Church. What is the role of local municipal governments? It's to, David would teach us, it's to provide services to citizens that they cannot easily provide themselves. And so maybe that question of private versus public is a question of that, what, you know, if it's gonna be handled, I'm a believer that if it's gonna be handled, you know, by the private entity, government doesn't need to be involved. But I don't see the private entity, perhaps I don't see the private entity having solved this problem yet. So then we get to the point of inducing, sparking, catalyzing the whole thing as a public entity.
Now, I'll tell you a little story along this line. So, west of Ogden is the city of Clinton, and west Haven. Okay, and they're neighboring cities. Maybe there's some unincorporated county between them. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a couple highways that run east-west. They're maybe 2 miles apart. Clinton is on one, and the West Haven is on the other. And this happened a while back, but I'll always remember it. So West Haven is talking to me about, hey, you know, what about doing a redevelopment type area, and you know, we want to put some commercial in our city because we have this intersection of 2 highways, which is really deal for it. And over in Clinton, just only 2-3 miles away, they had developed 2 corners of their intersection. And it's a straight shot. I mean, they're just farms in between them. And so, you know, they're talking about this. And I still remember when the councilman was like, well, Clinton didn't do nothing, and they got that development over there. Why should we do anything? And I said, well, you know, that's another point. And then, I don't know, about 2 months went by, and they were still kind of chewing on it. They weren't sure what they wanted to do as the council. And I had to write them a letter, and I said, okay, look, I consulted with you. You haven't paid me any money. You know, I've never actually entered into a formal engagement letter with you. And I'm writing you now to tell you that I don't represent you. Okay? Well, I had to write this letter because Clinton called me and they were ready to take action. And they said, you know what? We want to develop the other 2 corners on our intersection, and we want to create a redevelopment agency so that we can induce businesses to locate here. And they got completely built out, and they got all the commercial and cool and so that goes to the point of just that inducement can, you know, really cause things to happen, but without it doesn't. That was an uncomfortable. That's the only time I've ever written a potential client and said, I don't represent you. That's funny. I don't write any those letters.
Wasn't there a yet in there?
You know what? Once Clinton started building, I think West Haven was a little not happy. Well, thank you for having me up. You know, I've worked with a variety of your communities on this, that, or the other, and you know, hope to continue to do that. You know, and I see that, you know, that it's still in the exploration stage, and I can see, you know, things need to be moved over. But when you get a group that's ready to move forward, then let's do something. There can be some very exciting things that could happen for the south end of the valley here. And I will close by telling a little story. So about 20-ish years ago, Larry Ander, who had been county commissioner and at that time was the city manager for New York City, he invited me to a meeting. And I said, well, who all is invited to this meeting? Because I was kind of wondering who I was going to be talking to. And he said, everybody but Logan. And I just always remember him as, he didn't chuckle or anything, right? He's just like, everybody's invited except for me. They won't be there. Everybody else will be. I said, okay, well, that's up to who my audience is, so, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to email the slides to all of you in attendance. You can share those with your council and staff and whoever might need them.
And Cheryl, I don't know how complete of minutes, we need minutes for our meeting, would be happy to share that with you, the communities. Okay, so we have a list of attendees, I would just send those minutes to everyone, send them. Eric, thank you so much. Gateway City Council, without objection, will be adjourned, no objection, we're adjourned, thank you. People just spoke across the room and said without objection, the Gateway City Parks and Rec Committee will be adjourned, there was no objection, so she declared the meeting adjourned. Thanks, guys.